fellow Toastmasters and guests. I think all of us have a story to tell. I think if all of us were made to stand here for a minute, we would have a wonderful tale about our lives that we would share with one another and talk about with one another. And there are people in our lives who've had that kind of difference, who've had that kind of impact in our lives. Today, I want to share the story of one such person who had a very similar impact. But to know that story, you need to know a little bit about who I am and what I stand for. On 17 September 1992, I was born at 7-Day Hospital in Southern. Now, this was no ordinary day. One, I was born, and two, it was the birthday of Altaf Bhai. My grandmother, who had no kids, no sons of her own, she desperately wanted a son. And when the news broke out that her eldest daughter just had a son, she rushed to the hospital, and there was a large procession that was going on. There was a huge cake, and there was a lot of celebration on the streets, and I can just imagine the frustration that my grandmother must have been going through trying to see her first ever grandson. Now, the ultrasound, and again I repeat, the ultrasound had clearly told my grandmother that it was going to be a daughter. But when she heard that it was going to be a son, she rushed to the hospital, and as much so, she bribed the nurse to just make sure that it was a son and not a daughter. Now, this is an incident about my past that I don't talk about too much, but I just wanted to show you the kind of exhilaration and anticipation that she had. Being the first son in the family, the eldest son in the family, I was always very pampered. I remember one instance with my grandmother when she used to drive me around the neighborhood, and when she used to drop me home, I used to start crying. I used to say, I want fries. And then she used to drive me around the entire neighborhood, get me fries, and the moment we stepped on my porch, I would start crying again. Because then I would ask for ice cream. And then she would take me around the porch once again, and I would come back and start crying again. And then I would ask for biscuits, and that series of events would go on and on till she made sure that I was full and that I got home safely. Being spoiled, I spent my school at FPS. It was a good school at Defense. But really I never took responsibility because my grandmother was there and she used to provide for everything that I wanted. So everything that I used to ask for, she used to make sure that was there. So I grew up at FPS and I failed a lot of courses, I failed a lot of grades, and I used to have a lot of fights. Growing up, if someone used to say something to my sister, I used to slap them and punch them and start beating them up at the slightest of moments, and that really didn't go well with my grandmother at every parent-teacher meeting. But as a loving grandmother, she always supported me, always tried to show the best part of me to the world. But in grade 8, I was actually kicked out of school. Now what does a grandmother do who wants to make sure that her grandson becomes something in the world, and also, you know, to have that respect in the family? So with a very heavy heart, she sends me to a boarding school. Now this grandmother who raised me up, she made a decision that I'm going to send Umer for 3 years to Abbottabad, a place that no one in my family had ever heard about. And she sent me there to an army camp in the hopes that after 3 years, Umer would become a Sudra Bacha, a decent, disciplined kid in Pakistani society. 3 years passed away, nothing really happened. I still failed my classes, I still failed my grades. So she called me back. She was like, nothing is going to happen with you over there. You might as well stay with me where I can see you and see you grow, because she was pretty old by that time. But when I was at the boarding school, I realized the importance of Karachi. I realized the freedoms that we enjoyed. I realized what family meant, what friendship meant. And when I came back for my A-levels, that too at FPS, I started applying myself a little bit more. Not because, I think the only reason I started applying myself because I was scared. I didn't want to go back to the boarding school because I knew that if I messed up again, she would probably send me back. But A-levels went this way, and eventually I got admission into a university called CBM. Now, I was on the verge of failing again. I had a very bad GPA. But that was when this particular person who had been a shadow for my entire life, she passed away. Now this was a very difficult moment, because now this person who you look up to and know that everything's going to be okay at the end of the day when you look at her, when she's no longer there and you have to support a family and look after a family, that's when you really open your eyes. That's when you realize and you decide that perhaps there's more to your life. And honestly, the motivation, if I think about it, for me to do what I do today was because I want to make her proud. I still feel that maybe she's out there looking at me and she's believing that, okay, I couldn't make Umer anything while I was there, but maybe just the loss of me not being here, maybe that inspires him to do his best. So one step at a time, I started working on myself with the principles that my Nani gave me. That Umar, don't focus on what's happening in the world, focus on what you can do and the contributions that you can make. So in CBM, while I was failing throughout my life, eventually by year 4, I was the top student in my university. Then I got a chance to work at a wonderful company, TCS, then another wonderful company, GSK, and now, inshallah, I'll be traveling next week to do my MBA abroad. So the point being that if it's not always we ourselves who's making all the important contributions in our life. There are people in our lives, and we don't realize it at the moment, but they have an influence on who you are. It could be your parents, it could be an uncle, it could be an aunt, it could be even your friends, who are really influencing you day by day. And I think the research is absolutely right when they say that you become like the five people you hang out the most with. And I think I realized that when my grandmother passed away, because then I had to live with an identity of what my grandmother would think if she was here. So at the end of the day, the story remains. Regardless of who we are, regardless of where we come from, respect and appreciate the people in your life, because you never know whether they're going to be with you the next year or not. Over to you.